I'd like you to come with me on a journey. It's a journey of my family's ancestry, and it also reflects the journey that many families coming to America have made through history. I'm in Slovakia, a place with a long past and a complex history. This is my Slovakia Ancestry adventure. My family came from this place at a time when the independent country of Slovakia didn't exist. The modern-day country of Slovakia is a place of wonderful nature, blended with breathtaking, man-made artifacts that go back centuries. We'll also see some rustic eccentricities along the way. This is a new place to explore for me too, and I'll try to look at things from interesting perspectives. So come along with me. My family came from modern-day Slovakia within the period 1880 to 1910. In that period, about 17 million people immigrated to the United States. Because there was no separate country of Slovakia at the time, it's hard to know how many Slovaks came to the USA with any precision. And they didn't all stay permanently. My best estimate is that something like 15% of the total population of the Slovak lands came here. A large proportion indeed. This looks nice. Let's just relax for a while. No need to rush. Anyway, well, maybe we should get into it. This is part 1. Spišská Teplica. The story of Stefanos Ruman, born 1879. The village name tells us a lot about where we are geographically. We'll drop Teplica for now and focus on the first word. And anyway, the ska is just an adjective modifier, so we'll drop that as well to get Spiš, which is the part of Slovakia we're in. Spiš was an old county of the Kingdom of Hungary, well documented in the old maps of the region. This is not your brain, this is a map of old Kingdom of Hungary. The arrow points to Spiš, which was called Szepes in the Hungarian language. Now the brain-like form shows up in blue on a map of the historical Austro-Hungarian Empire, superimposed on the modern country borders. The Kingdom of Hungary was part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. There was no separate Slovakia at the time. Here we can see where Spiš fits into the modern country of Slovakia, which has only existed since 1993. More on that later. Today, Spiš is no longer an administrative entity, rather it's a legacy term still applied to the region. Here's the modern country of Slovakia on a map of Europe, pretty much right in the center. Going back to the Teplica part of the name, that comes from the Slovak word tepla, which means heat. It's named for warm springs in the area, which can even prevent the village stream from freezing during winter. As we take off, let's look at my family tree, pruned to show my ancestors from Slovakia. On my father's side are all my great-grandparents. On my mother's side is one branch of my great-great-grandparents. Today we'll focus on Stefanos Ruman. More on names shortly. Here's a panning shot of the village, which was first documented in the year 1280. In the old days, villagers were farmers, woodworkers, or ran the paper mill founded in 1613. It lies on a broad plain at some distance from any surrounding high country. The village population in the year 2022 was nearly 2,300 people. Here's the population each decade, 1880 to 1910. Just in that period, there was a population decline of about 7%. How do I discover where my great-grandfather came from? Clues come from U.S. records like the decadal census that can point to place of origin and year of immigration. Draft cards can provide parents' names or place of birth. Death certificates and obituaries sometimes contain pieces of the puzzle. I also use primary source historical references from the old country, old town maps in conjunction with land books for collecting tax information. The ultimate prize is a baptism record. Here's the baptism book containing today's subject. This is a good time to talk about the different languages used in all these documents. Latin was the main church language. This land was part of the Kingdom of Hungary, so we also see Hungarian. It was also part of Austria-Hungary, so we see German. In some local records, Slovak was used, although not often in official documents. And of course, I'll associate these terms all back to English. Let's take a closer look at this entry. It's the 16th entry of 1879, a birth date of June 5th, a baptism date of June 8th, the given name Stephanos. This is a male, a legitimate birth. On the opposite page, we see his parents were named Ioannis Ruman and Maria Gavalier. They're both Roman Catholic. Ioannis is listed as an operar, which means he's a day laborer. It shows they live in Teplica, as it was known at the time, and also lists the godparents. The names involved look familiar, but maybe a little strange. Stephanos is the Latin version of what we in English would call Stephen or Steve. The Hungarian form is István. German and Slovak forms are said similarly as Stefan. Stefan's father is called Ioannis, the Latin form of the name John in English. The Hungarian form is János, German Johann, Slovak Jan. Steve's mother's name is Maria or Maria. All the other languages use some basic form of that same name, and of course in English we have the name Maria as well. However, in those days someone called Maria in the old country would most likely have been called Mary after coming to the USA. Here's the land book from 1869. It shows János Ruman, who was the father of István. See what I'm doing with the names? Owning plot 284. Now, looking at the old village map, here's plot 284. Where does old plot 284 sit in the modern town? As we pan from west to east, it's about in this area where the oval is. In this case, I can't be more precise because the map proportions aren't sufficient. Anyway, the houses there today are not from the old period. There's the church where the arrow points, and as we pan further east, we see the cemetery. This is a good time to mention that in Slovakia they practice a custom that's common in many places in Europe. That is that graves may be reused after a period of maybe as short as a decade or two. I don't know exactly the process of doing this, and I'm not sure I want to know, but it will happen if the family won't or can't pay to maintain. In Spišská Teplica, the male Rumen line seems to have disappeared and there are no Rumen grave markers left. Of course, the most plainly visible attraction of most Slovak villages is the church. Here in the village square is the beautiful Church of the Holy Trinity. The first village church was built on this ground, apparently swampy at the time, in 1398. It didn't sink into the swamp, but it was burned down by the Hussites in 1436. The second structure was built in 1440, but it also had some issues due to the groundwater and was ultimately dismantled. The current building's foundation was established in 1837. Unfortunately, its bell tower didn't come out right and had to be demolished and replaced around the 1860s. But then, this was made too narrow for the existing bells, so new ones had to be fashioned. With this saga in the past, the church now looks much like Stephanos Ruman would have seen inside and out before his leaving for America. Inside the church are several old pieces, a statue of Mary near the altar from the 13th century, a baptismal font from 1896, the organ purchased in 1875, and the old pulpit, which would be hard to climb into today. I was also allowed to go up the clearly old, heavy wooden spiral stairs leading up to the organ gallery. It afforded a magnificent view of the church, so wonderfully decorated and well kept. My guide Michal and I also visited the Spišská Teplica museum right next to the church. The curator came to give us a special tour of this nice new museum. Here's one more pan of the central square of the town. We see the church. Behind it is a nice little garden area right along the stream that goes through the village. Down the main road was the blacksmith shop in the old days, but any signs of it are long gone. There's still some farming going on, and we saw a few older houses here and there. During our visit to the church, we also got invited for lunch, lovely goulash, and some Moravian cakes for dessert. Gabriella isn't even a relative, just a typically gracious Slovak host. We also met Ipsi and Baba. Plus we met a neighbor who had some chickens. I don't know their names, but the neighbor does wonderful hand carvings into linden wood, like these shown here. They're magnificent. Gabriella also had a nice, eclectic, artistic touch in her garden area. One final pan of the town, the rain in the distance didn't impact our ability to sweep down to the nearby chapel called Predne Dieli from the 1800s. It sits just at the edge of town and affords a wonderful view of the high Tatra mountains. Here are the elevation numbers comparing Spišská Teplica to the highest peak in Slovakia, known as Gerlach, seen right in the middle of the range. Beautiful. Let me know what you think of this first video in the series. Let's end with a couple views of the church and its inside decorations. Including this 17th century Last Supper carving. We close with a final view of the High Tatras. Next time we'll talk about Zavadka. Thanks and see you then.